I'm sure that you've all read this story or heard it in Sunday school or something like that. It's a very common story that is told in the church, isn't it? But I want to draw your attention to verse 10. There's a summary statement there. He said, "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." Now, he doesn't say the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. He uses a conjunction to before. For the Son of Man has come. So he's providing us with an explanation of what he's already said in verse 9. Look at what he says. Today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham. And he's speaking about Zacchaeus. Now, we might not think much about that, but can you imagine being part of the crowd that were gathered there that day? And there was quite a big crowd, because Zacchaeus couldn't see anybody, could he? He was a small bloke, and there's a crowd around Jesus. And they just heard what he said. They've just observed what he's done. He's gone and invited himself to Zacchaeus' house. What's wrong with this scene? There's something wrong. Jesus has got it wrong. This is a man who's a sinner. He's an outcast in their society. He wasn't welcome in the synagogue. He couldn't go to the temple. He was regarded as a sinner. He was cut off from society. He was also a traitor. He worked for the Romans, the occupation troops. And now here he is being told that he's a son of Abraham, implying that he's accepted by God, but he wasn't accepted in the community. And they found this very difficult to understand. It doesn't make any sense. Jesus has got it all wrong. And then to accept or to even ask for hospitality with a sinner, it just didn't sit well. So Jesus is taking the opportunity to explain his actions. He's trying to help the people resolve the tension that they're feeling. So he says, so he gives them this explanation statement. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. So this was good news. So I want you to think about that statement. I mean, even using the title for the Son of Man, I mean, what's he saying here? This is not a new title. I mean, you can go back into Daniel chapter 7, and there's one like the Son of Man mentioned there. He's using this not to deny his deity, but to express the reality of his humanity. He was one of us. He was just like us. And so, being a fully human being, and as a believer, we can look at him and know that he has been through what we went through and more. And so if he says, I will pour out my grace and enabling upon you, we can trust him, because he knows exactly what we go through. He knows the troubles and the uncertainties of our life. He knows how we feel. And you see, what the writer of Hebrews says in chapter 2, verse 11 was also interesting. He said, for both he who sanctifies, that's God, and those who are being sanctified, that's us, are all one. So here is God, the Lord, telling us he's the same as us. And for this reason, he's not ashamed to call us brethren. Now, I want you also to consider the task that is assigned to Jesus. For the Son of Man has come, what for? To seek and to save. Now, both to seek and to save, and I'm sorry to be a bit technical sometimes, are both in the infinitives. And it means it reveals some purpose here. He's come to seek and he's come to save. Now look at the word to seek. What's he saying? Here he's referring to the fact that Jesus, about his mission, is actively engaged in seeking people out. So he's actively engaged even today, not just back then, in seeking people out. He will not, there's no place that he won't look. There's no place that he won't go. He is completely dedicated to his mission to seek out his lost. Now the second word, to save, reveals his ability and his power to achieve his objective. Now what's that objective? It's to save the lost. Jesus came to give salvation to lost and ruined men and women like us. Now we might say, but who are the lost? I think about who are the lost? Do you feel lost this morning? Did you ever feel lost? So what's he on about? We all know what it's like with if you've got children or grandchildren and you go to the shopping centre, particularly this time of the year, and the kids are on holidays, and you're wandering around and you're buying presents, and you've chosen some things, you go up to the counter, and while the presents are being wrapped and your process of payment is going through, your kids are bored. And so they're looking around. They're looking for something excitement. And they look down there and there's some lights, there's some glamour, there's some glitter, and there's a lot of activity. It's Father Christmas. And he's taking photographs. And so what do? They just wander down. And they're lost. And you're busy collecting these things that you've all chosen, you've paid for it, and then you look around and your kids have gone. You ever experienced this or heard about this? These are the sort of things that happen, don't they? This is not what he's talking about. This is something far more serious than being lost in a shopping centre. The word that is being used here, to be lost, means to be destroyed, to be killed, to be brought to ruin, to be brought to nothing. This is the word that he's talking about. This is far worse than losing your way in a shopping centre or even on the roads. And now this state of lostness refers to our fallen condition before God. That means that if we're in this state of fallenness, and all of us have been there, some of us have been rescued, but some of you still may be in that state of lostness. He's saying to us that you are under divine condemnation because of your sins. You're in a state of ruination. You're being brought to absolutely nothing. And this is a very serious condition. It's not something that we can rectify ourselves. We need outside help to bring us out of that state into a state of acceptance with Almighty God. So we're in a very difficult, precarious situation. Now, the Apostle Paul writes about the same condition in Ephesians chapter 2, but he uses different words. Now, he mentions in verse 1 and 2 there the fact that we are dead and God has to give us life. But then he goes on to describe in verse 12, he says this: at that time, this is those who are lost, you were without Christ. Being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Now, when he says there, we're without Christ, being aliens, it almost suggests there's a process going on, but grammatically it's not that. It's a completed action in a sense. We have been alienated or estranged from God. A process already completed. We're not part of God's family. Now you think about how serious that condition is if you're an unbeliever. You're outside. God, you could say, is over there and you're here. And the two are not mixing. You see, an unbeliever gives no glory to God. They have no love for God, no desire for God, no desire to serve God, to know him or anything. And the result is they rob God of honour that he is due as their creator. And they don't care. They don't even think about it. They will just live their life the way they want, independent of God, and have nothing to do with him, and don't realise they're dishonouring him. You see, we're lost. We're cut off from God. We have no access, do we? And unless God takes the initiative, we're in a terrible situation. And this might be you today. Think about it. If you're in this lost state, your condition is very, very serious. Now the second thing, we're lost to ourselves. Our life is meaningless. You know, if you look in Luke 15, we have the parable there, and the parable of the father and the sons, it resembles God. And the father says there in verse 24, "For my son was dead and is alive again." Now he's not talking about he's had a resurrection. He was lost, he was cut off, he was no contact. And he's been found, and they began to be merry. You see, this is the situation here. People are lost to themselves. They go off wandering around, doing their own thing, oblivious to the concept of God, the Creator. They don't think about that. He's not involved in their lives. And so they're cut off and they have no contact with him. Or they might come to church. They may even read a Bible. They may even pray. But there's no relationship. Just religion. Dead religion. Now here is a situation where they are completely lost. They're just like sheep wandering around aimlessly. I can remember my wife saying to me after she got converted that before that she got converted, she was always busy doing different things. She liked dancing. And her father had his own dance band, so everywhere he had an opportunity to play in the bands and take his band, she would go with him, and so she enjoyed ballroom dancing and all that kind of stuff. She loved it. But she also liked motorbike racing. And one of her relatives would take her. And she would go to these races, and she loved it. She also was a very big supporter of West Bromwich Albion, one of the football teams. And one of her uncles was even worked for the Albion. So she would often go there. And she said to me, I was so busy with all these things filling up my life. But after I'd finished the dancing, the racing, the football, I was still empty. There was nothing in my life. It was all aimless. It was futile. And I didn't know how to fill that up, that vacuum that was in my life. We're all like that. For you it might be a combination of a number of things, your career, your hobbies, your interests, and they can be all-consuming and never be satisfying. That's the situation of being lost. But when you look at the scriptures, you look at various passages like in Psalm 14. I'll read verse 1 to 3. He said, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. He said, they are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none who do good. He said, the Lord looks down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there are any who understand, who seek God. The condition is that they've turned aside. They've become corrupt. There is none who does good, no, not one. That's our condition. I mean, the Apostle Paul writes a similar thing in Romans, Romans chapter 3, and from verse 10. He said, there is none righteous. He's actually quoting Psalm 14. There is none who understands. There is none who seek after God. They've all turned aside. They've altogether become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. And then in verse 18, there's no fear of God before their eyes. Can you imagine that's the way we are? And this may be the way you are right now before God. Oh, your life might be busy. You may be endeavouring to do the right thing, live the right way. But you're cut off from God. Being busy is not fulfilling. You may be in a different category and you might live an immoral life, corrupt, have no care, careless about what you do, who you go with. And you don't realise the effect that sin is having upon your life. Because sin breaks us. It breaks relationships. It corrupts us. It intoxicates us with its lies and deception. And its aim is to destroy us. So all these are pictures of the way we are, or the way we were. And no matter how well dressed we might be today, and the image that we project might be well acceptable, but underneath that veneer is a life that is lost, empty, aimless, sad. And isn't that possibly that we've all been through this? All of us who are believers have been through this, because that's the way we were. My wife was certainly like that, but the Lord saved her. But then we're also lost by reason of the fact that we're descendants of Adam and Eve. We've got this tendency to want to sin, this desire to sort of engage in those things which we know we perhaps shouldn't. But they're so tempting, aren't they? So appealing to us that we find them irresistible. And so we cave in, we give in. Nobody's going to see us, particularly if we're on our own. You're watching a program, you're reading a book, watching something else. And nobody knows what you're watching. You think nobody sees you, nobody will know. I'll get away with it. But we don't. The Lord knows. The Lord sees us. Everything we do. David said in Psalm 51 verse 5, he said, behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. You and I are lost because of the disposition, a bias towards sin. We want to sin. But we're also lost because we choose to do these things. In a lost state, it's so easy, isn't it? People tell lies. And all it is to cover up, to make sure that you don't get the blame. Or to exaggerate the truth. We're all guilty of these things. And it's a sad condition that we're in. And we're without hope. And yet the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. Because he knows how severe our condition is. How needy we really are. And he comes with power to deliver us. Resurrection power. Because only he, the Lord of all life, can breathe life into a dead person. And if you're lost, you're dead. You're spiritually dead. Remember the parable that we just read in Luke 15. The father talked about his son being dead. He was dead to him because he was away in a far country. And we're lost, we're dead to God. But he comes with resurrection power to breathe into us life. Jesus came on a rescue mission. He came to seek, to find, to rescue, to save and deliver. And some of us can rejoice in that, being the recipients of this wonderful truth. But is he seeking for you today? Has he been coming and prompting you over a period of time? And today your conscience is a bit tender. So when and where does Jesus go seeking and saving? Well, look with me in Luke chapter 5. Again, some parables from Luke verse 4 down, for the whole chapter really. But there are parables that teach us that Jesus comes like a loving shepherd. Now he's got 100 sheep, the image that we've got there. And we think, well, he's lost one. And these sheep are breeding, so it won't be long to replace the one. So I'll just, take it as a loss. I'm not going to be bothered to go out in all weathers and travelling all over the paddocks and that to find. It could have been eaten by a wolf by now, or a tiger, or something else. He could be dead. He could have fallen into a pit. Why waste my time to go looking? But the shepherd of our souls does. We may have wandered into a far country. We may have got away so much away from what we've got taught. And he draws us back. He keeps looking. And that's what he does. He doesn't give up. Oh, he may be tired. He may have had a rough day, but you're lost. And he's coming to look for you. Or the other one with a woman who lights a lamp and sweeps the house. She's diligently searching for her coins. That's what the Lord does when he came looking for you. Or when he's coming looking for you. Sometimes, in the providence of God, he moves us from where we were born to some other location. And you think, God, why didn't you do it there when it was comfortable? I was already here. Why didn't you do it then? But he comes in the time that he's allotted. Personal experience, he moved me 200 miles from where I was born down to a place called Torquay in Devon, where my wife's family lived. And that's where I got converted. God did that. My son, or one of my sons, got moved to Puerto Rico to get converted. Why couldn't he here in Brisbane? But I was rejoicing when he got converted. And you rejoice too. Because God is so committed to this cause to seek and to save the lost. And he might be looking for you today. And I want you to consider the actions of the Lord himself. If you look in Luke 5 from verse 4, what did he do? He found Simon Peter, Andrew his brother, the two sons of Zebedee, John and James. And then later on we see Levi, a tax collector, Matthew. He went looking for these men. And Jesus came looking for you, wherever you were. You might have had no interest at all in Christianity. No background at all, like me. And the Lord comes. And you can't escape him. So what's implied by this statement that Jesus comes to seek and to save? It implies that he has pity upon us, the lost. He's aware of our lost condition. And he spares no effort in coming to seek and to save us. He always takes the initiative. It's not us. We're so dead, unresponsive. How can we make a decision to follow Christ if we're dead? We can't. But he comes. He's persistent. And eventually we give in. The Apostle Paul, when he was in Corinth, you read in the book of Acts chapter 18 and verse 9 and 10. Now we know that Corinth was a terrible place. It's full of idolatry. It was an immoral city. It was all kinds of things that was perverse that was going on there in that city. And the Apostle Paul was probably opposed in that area. And we see here in verse 9 and 10, the Lord spoke in a vision to the Apostle Paul. He says, do not be afraid. Now he's telling the great Apostle Paul not to be afraid, but to speak. Think about that. What that implies is that Paul was obviously scared. And he'd stopped talking. This was causing him a lot of problems. And so he stopped. Do not keep silent, he says. So the Apostle Paul had obviously been intimidated by the surroundings. And so he didn't. He said, for I am with you, and no one will attack you or hurt you. I've many people in this city. This was a dark city. And Paul perhaps wanted to escape, to go somewhere more friendly, go to Berean. They at least look at the scriptures there. And so let's go there. And God says, no, you stay here in this dark place so that your light can shine. And isn't that where our lights will be brighter in a dark place? I mean, you think about it. You come out here in the country and you look at the stars. They're so obvious. You come in the city with all the other lights around, you can't see them so much. You and I shine in a very dark place, and our world is getting darker. And it needs to see us. And here what we have is the Apostle Paul wanting to give up, wanting to move on, go to a more friendly place, and the Lord says, no, you stay here, I've got plenty of people here. And he stayed there about 18 months. But it also implies the diligence of his rescue mission. See, when Jesus goes looking, he's thorough. And the lost soul, your soul, is not easy to recover. It's very difficult to persuade you or me to change sides. We're happy in that darkness. We don't mind it at all. We're comfortable. And to want to be changed into something a religious freak, that's the last thing on your mind. But when God comes and he changes you so much that even your own family can't recognize what's happened to you, he does that. And he's thorough. He's so concerned about us. And he sends many warnings. He sends many convictions that we smother, and many tender graces that come our way through the pulpit or things we read and we ignore. But he's persistent. And maybe you can testify to that. How many years, weeks, months, or whatever it was that God was knocking on the door of your life, calling you, prompting you, and you ignored. I don't want to be religious. I don't want to be like them. They're different. Isn't this the way we act? So what's the means that he uses? That God uses to convince us to change? Two things, I think. His word and his spirit. I mean, Jesus came from heaven. He came as a teacher, calling sinners to follow him. And he's still doing it. By his Spirit, he's still doing this. Through his word, through his servants, through you, through me. I mean, it's the greatest privilege that you've got, being a servant of the living God, his ambassador in your home or in your workplace, wherever. He's called you to be there. And he's given you the privilege and opportunity and honour of being his representative in their environment. It is an honour, brother. So he uses people like us in their environment. See, Jesus said in Revelation 3:20, a well-known verse which we all probably know, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hear my voice and open the door, I will come in." Now, I know the context demands that we say, well, that's for the church. But I think the Puritans got it right. If you look in John Flavel, I think it's volume 4, he spent 11 sermons on that verse. And he applied it to the individual, not the church. And I think it's relevant. Because how many times does the Lord have to keep knocking on your door to get your attention? To stop you from sinning, from get you away from some bondage that you're involved in, whatever it is. How many times has he come? He never lets up, does he? He's so persistent. And when we're going through that transition, we're really struggling. We feel guilty, we feel unclean, and we don't know why. What have we done wrong? We've never robbed a bank, we've never beaten anybody up, but we feel so guilty, so dirty, so condemned, because the Spirit of work is at work in our lives. And he's knocking on the door. And you notice something. He doesn't send a representative, he comes himself. Behold, I stand at the door. And it's emphatic. That's who we deal with. That's the God who we deal with, who loves us so much. He spares no effort in looking for us. But the second means is the Spirit. You see, the Holy Spirit works in our lives and overcomes the stubbornness and the darkness in our souls, because we are antagonistic against God. So by the Spirit's invincible grace, he changes our hearts and brings us to the place where we want to become the people that we've been resisting before. That's what he does. You ask yourself, what was you like before you became a Christian? You enjoyed the darkness. You didn't want to be tied up with church-going people. I might be speaking personally. That was my experience. It might have been yours. I didn't want it. But now, what has God done? I love the place. I love the people. He brought about that change, not me. I wasn't looking for it. Now, it says in Psalm 110 verse 3, so I've normally got this sorted out. It says there in verse 3, your people shall be willing, in some translations, or volunteers in the day of your power. Now the Hebrew word we translated volunteers or willing is speaking about a spontaneous act. So it's something that you do. This is the work of the Spirit. All of a sudden we want to do what we didn't want to do before. That's what he's doing. He makes us willing. We become volunteers. It's a free will act. This is the work of the Spirit in our lives, bringing us out of that utter darkness, that lostness, and having life. We've changed families. We all of a sudden are opening, we're into an environment that is beyond our comprehension. The Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. So how are you going to respond this morning? Are you going to ignore the fact that the Lord has been knocking on the door of your life? And you're just going to just drift along, oblivious to all this, having no interest? You're going to be like that? The son of a friend of mine, he said to his dad, you believe that God has chosen a people for himself? Yes. Then that means unless the Lord calls me, I can't come. Yes. Then I may as well live how I want and wait till he calls me. Now, some of you might take that attitude and think, fair thing. God is sovereign. I can't come unless he calls me. And that's what this son did. Now, he works for the Treasury Department in Canberra, so that's probably why we got problems. He's an economics expert and accountancy. But that was his attitude. Maybe yours is the same. And think, well, God is sovereign. I'll just live how I want and take a more passive approach and just live my life. But what does the scriptures exhort us to do? If you look in Isaiah 55 verse 6, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way and the unrighteous man his thoughts, and let him return to the Lord. He's calling you for action. He's not saying, well, take a passive approach and just sit back and wait till I come round. You just live how you want, do what you want, be as bad as you want. It's fine. No, he says you have to take a proactive approach. You have to seek the Lord while he can be found. And if you seek him with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, what's the promise that God gives? You will find him. You'll find him. So, my friend, how are you going to respond today? You know, if you're not a believer, that you're lost. Your condition is very serious. But what is your response going to be? You're going to take a passive, inactive approach? Or you're going to do what he exhorts you to do? And what about us as believers? You know, how we should respond? I mean, God has blessed us. He's taken us out of the pit and brought us into his family. He's changed the way we think, the way we act. And that's the process that is continuing, of course. But is at work in our lives. The sovereign Lord of the universe is at work in our lives. And it blows my mind. Why would he bother with the likes of people like us who want to do our own thing? But he does. He does care. He loves. And he wants you to come to him. So what are you going to do today? Ignore, or will you respond? May the Lord bless you.